Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have with us Nikki Rausch, who's the CEO of Sales Maven, an organization dedicated to authentic selling. Nikki, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
You're welcome. I'm excited to learn about what in the world authentic selling is, because I think that sometimes people would say the word authentic and selling might not be cohesive. So I want to dive into that, but give us a little bit of background on your entrepreneurial journey.
Okay, so I'm a sales professional by trade. And in addition to that, I am Master Certified Practitioner of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And if that's a new term to anybody listening, it's essentially the study of communication. I got into studying NLP as a way to help me become a better communicator in the selling process. And the end result is it made me a better communicator in all areas of my life, which has been great. So when I decided to start Sales Maven, it was really with this idea of teaching people how to have more strategic, more authentic sales conversations, because I find that there's a lot of training out there about, how to market your business. And there's a lot of training about, bringing leads in the door. But the thing that I think people often struggle is, what do I do now when that lead comes in the door? Yeah. What do I say on those discovery calls? And that's the piece that I really love, is the language piece. And so, so my business was born out of really just wanting to work mostly with entrepreneurs and teach them how to be strategic in their sales conversations. And when I think about authentic selling, it's the difference is that what I teach is selling is something that you do with somebody, not to somebody.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And when you were mentioning that with messaging and NLP, it made me think of a question. So maybe you get this a lot, or maybe this is me from the outside looking in, asking this question that a lot of people might be thinking in their mind as well. So here goes. Hey, that's all great, fine and good with NLP, but when you use it, isn't there a chance that people can feel manipulated and like, oh, you're just using a script, or you're just, I feel like that could be, if you're not doing it right. And I remember way back in the day seeing some sales training of, I forget the real word for it, but it's really called aping. Like when someone leans back in their chair, you should slowly lean back and mirror them. And at some point, if you do it wrong, they're like, why are you copying me? That's just weird.
Yeah. Yeah. So NLP, they call that matching and mirroring. And to answer your question, with anything, there can be, it can be used for good or it can be used for bad. So I will say that a lot of the concepts that I teach, I actually talk about using it with a high level of integrity. And the objective is not to manipulate. The objective is to help add flexibility to your own behavior to put the other person at ease. And it's not some secret, like you're not hypnotizing and you're not forcing anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. What you are doing is, it's kind of my all-time favorite quote, which is, "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape." What I teach is how to add a little bit of flexibility to your approach, because if you show up in the world as like, hey, this is me, take it or leave it. If you don't like it, go kick rocks. Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is, a lot of people will leave it because they don't appreciate your approach, or they find that you talk too fast, or you talk too slow, or you're not really, showing that you're listening in any way. So people don't like to be treated like they're a wallet. So when you start to apply these techniques to put the other person at ease, it allows for them to focus more on the conversation they're having with you. It doesn't force anybody or, manipulate anybody to buy from you. And I often say too that your job when you're selling is not to convince people to buy from you. Your job is first, your job is to understand what is the need and what is the want from the other person. And if you understand they have a need or want, then your job is to put an offer in front of them that makes sense for them to get that need or that want met. If you're in a conversation with somebody who doesn't have a need or a want, and you still push or try to convince them that they need to buy your product or they need to buy your service, then you are out of integrity.
Yeah.
And so really it's learning how to bless and release the people who are not the right fit for you and leave them having had a good conversation and feeling good about their interaction with you, even if they're not going to be a client. And also identifying quickly who are the people that are a good fit for you and being flexible in your behavior so that they are comfortable in the conversation. So it's not really about you, it's about them.
You know, and I agree with all of that. I've been through some sales trainings before where they will teach you, they'll say, we will teach you how to make them feel comfortable and make you feel less salesy and all those normal buzzwords. But then when you get in there, that discovery call and that sales strategy call, the next one or the next section of the call, really focuses so much on creating that tension and gap. Like, where do you want to be? Where are you now? Hey, look, you're not there. I can help you get there. That kind of a thing. And my question would be, how do you train your clients and your strategy and your system to get the most relevant information quickly where they don't feel drug on? Because I do feel like there's going to be some people that just go, you know what, I got all the time in the world and it's a nice sunny day and I can chat with you forever. So ask away and let's just chit chat. But I think that there's a lot of people that just go, let's just get to the, I feel like for me, when I talk to people, I find myself saying this, like, here's an example. And then you can answer my question, which is, how do you make sure that you are asking just enough right questions to know how to present what you have to offer, ethically and logically and all of that, but yet not drag on and on and on. Well, there's this person that I was trying to reach for like the last 2 weeks, and we had emailed or we had connected on LinkedIn and then exchanged some message. Oh yeah, let's chat on the phone, and here's my cell, and I would call and get voicemail. And then I would text and, oh, hey, I'm in the mountains, or hey, and finally yesterday I see this call come in and it's from him. And I'm like, hey, are we finally, and I'd never met him before. I'm like, are we finally talking real and in person? And so we just had a nice conversation. And this person is a mover and a shaker and a high producer kind of person in the industry that he's in. And I said, let me just tell you something. Here's the bottom line. I just want to tell you real quick where I feel like my services could benefit your company and your organization. And if I can just lay that out real quick, if you feel like there's some, if that resonates with you, let's continue on. If not, then, hey, cool, we have a fun little chat. And so that just puts people at ease. And he's like, yeah, makes sense. And I start explaining, and he goes, okay, now how about this? And I answer that question, and he goes, okay, so send me a summary. I want to digest that. I feel like there could be some possibilities, but what I'm thinking right now is my son is in, and I think he could really benefit from. So what I'm saying is I didn't take him through this long questioning, how do you feel about it, and why do you feel like you're not achieving? And it's like that would just be so disingenuous. So how do you get right to the point so that you're not dragging people through this and they feel played or scripted,
Okay, so the example that you gave is such a good one, and I love this question. So first and foremost, I teach a 5-step process for selling. It's called the Selling Staircase. I wrote a book about it, and it's this 5 steps to the sales conversation. Step 3 is discovery. And what I teach here in the discovery is your job is, again, to ask strategic questions that lead the person to the path to hiring you. So all these questions of like, why aren't you there? And what do you want to do in 20 years? And that is crap. And I hate when people teach that stuff because it's a waste of people's time.
Yeah.
Now, before you even launch into questions, you did exactly what I teach, which is to ask permission. You don't just get somebody on the phone and then start asking them a bunch of questions without getting their permission first, because then they start to feel like, I feel like I'm on the witness stand. I feel like I'm being led down this really dangerous path and I don't know where we're going. So the foundation of everything I teach is built on rapport. If you don't have rapport, you've completely missed the boat here. So what you did is said, would it be all right if I share a little bit about this? If this is something that's interesting to you, we can talk a little bit more about that. And then he said, yes. You didn't just say, hey, I'm going to share all this stuff with you.
Yeah,
and
you didn't
if
do
it
the
works for you,
implied
great.
permission. That's a technique,
Yeah,
if you just mention it in passing and then blow right into it, that's the implied. Well, they couldn't get a word in edgewise.
And it shows a real lack of disrespect, frankly, but also it shows a lack of not really caring about the relationship. And again, sales is something you do with somebody, not to them. And therefore, you should never be talking at somebody. You should be talking with. And with his conversation and with his questions and with his back and forth. So you asked permission, he gave it, then you can proceed. But if you don't have permission, you shouldn't be proceeding. And frankly, showing up and telling somebody like, I have something you need and I can sell it to you. And, if you don't buy from me, your life's going to fall apart. Well, you didn't have permission.
Right.
Frankly, you skipped all the steps that I teach in the process. You went right to the sale. And that's why people go, ooh, sales is gross and sales is icky. That's because nobody taught them that there's a process. And when you're in the discovery process, your job is not to sell. Your job is to ask questions, ask permission, make sure they have a need. And
it almost feels like if you were to say, your job is to ask questions, and here's the questions to ask. How do you feel about, why aren't you? And what will happen if you don't fix this problem now? What happens to your poor family? Because I just asked you that question, and you have 2 kids, and if you don't make this blah, blah, blah. And now all of a sudden, that's asking questions, but you're doing it in a way that you're just wanting to come back and go, see, you told me that piece of info, so I'm going to use it against you now. When in reality, I just feel like just talk to the person and go, what are you really looking to do and fix, and what are some things? And there's many times that I've talked to people, I'm like, you know what, it's just not a fit. You're doing everything that you need to do. Just keep doing more of it. Kind of like when you watch on Shark Tank, they're like, I just don't want to invest because you don't need it. You don't need someone to take a portion of your company. So I really like the way that you say you just need to talk and create that relationship. And in reality, relationship marketing as a term is really just more like building rapport, building a relationship. And if a sale happens today, tomorrow, next month, next year, then that's fine. But I think the focus needs to be like what you're talking about, is creating that relationship where it's a two-way street, not just, I feel, like if I answer this question, it's going to come back to haunt me because they're going to use it in a sales, scenario on me.
Yeah. The other thing too is, and I do teach some questions that are good to have in your back pocket that help lead the person to hire you. But one of the biggest mistakes that people make in a discovery process is they ask questions they don't need the answers to until the person hires them. And it's a huge waste of that person's time. They haven't committed to hiring you yet. Therefore, you don't need to ask questions that you only need the answers to once they've agreed to move forward with you. So instead, be strategic in the questions that you ask them that are more in line with the things that you might offer. So for instance, I teach people how to create curiosity when they're talking about their business. I don't ask in a discovery call with somebody, what CRM are you using? Doesn't matter. But what I do ask is, are you able to create curiosity when you're talking about your business? And people go, what does that mean? Or tell me more about that, Nikki. Or no, I've heard you talk about creating curiosity and I'm not able to do it. Well, then that indicates right there, I may have something that's a good fit for this person because I teach this. So
and
make sure that the questions
what I find really interesting in using that word curiosity is in the last several years, you hear so much about, facts tell, story sells. So you should use story selling and story selling. And in reality, creating a good series of questions and a good story or example, case study kind of a thing really does open that questioning loop in their mind, which really is curiosity. But the fact that everybody else is talking about story selling, maybe saying the word curiosity is like, oh, yeah, I guess I don't know. Tell me more. And then now you've got their attention. And then if you use the word story or examples or, whatever, now they're ready to hear that. Whereas before they almost tune you out because it's like, oh, I just saw 4 Facebook messages about the same thing this week.
Yeah.
So how do you pick special words that are unique that would get someone to go, ooh, I don't know. That's kind of interesting. How does that work?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah. So how do you pick?
Okay,
so how do you guide your clients to pick certain words that would make someone, be curious, because you need to ask those questions, but then they need to know how to come up with those same questions in their sales conversations.
Well, one of the ways is to start to notice the people who have bought from you. What kind of feedback are they giving? What are the things that they go, oh, I've never heard anybody say it that way. I've never heard anybody talk about, this, or, or maybe I've heard this before, but I just haven't heard it in the way that you say it. Well, that's them giving you cues that these are the things that make you unique. And, curiosity is something I've been teaching since I started my business. And I find that sometimes people talk about it, but I teach it in a way that oftentimes people have never heard. And I teach it in an example of it's the difference between how you call a dog and how you call a cat. Now that makes it super memorable for people. So it's one of those things where people will show up in conversations with me that I have never met, but they've heard me on a podcast or they've read my book, and they'll go, oh, Nikki, I met this person, they had dog calling energy, or I met this person and oh, they were so good at the cat calling energy. Like then people will start to say things back to you. And the first time somebody repeated it back to me, I was like, oh, well, that obviously resonates with somebody. So Guess what? I'm going to build a course around this. I'm going to talk more about this. It's going to be written in my third book. And, and so look for the things the other thing is, what are the things that light people up? People will give you nonverbal cues when you say something that piques interest. Their eyes will open a little wider. They'll lean in. They'll have a question about what you just said. You want to start to make note of those things, because those are the things you want to bring into the next conversation and the next conversation, because it's piqued some interest for somebody.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I find myself doing that a whole lot, where it's it's like, ooh, that someone used that word really in a unique way, like oh, that really legitimizes the brand, doesn't it? And I'm like, oh, I like that. I'm going to, instead of you just find yourself kind of always being on the lookout for, phrases and words that should make someone go, hey, yeah, that resonates with me, and maybe you notice that it'll resonate with someone else. So talk a little bit about creating influence in client conversations.
Well, one of the ways to do that is to plant some seeds for somebody. So for instance, it's the way that you respond to their questions. It's learning how to give enough information for them to get their question answered, but without without word vomiting on somebody. Yeah. So for an example, if I was on a phone with somebody, and like you said, the guy had said to you, oh, that sounds like something like my son would benefit from, then it's an opportunity for you to, you don't want to just jump all over that and then ignore the whole conversation, but you might say, well, is it something that it would make sense for us to have a conversation, and would you be willing to help facilitate that? Could we get that set up now? How else can I be of service to you? And you kind of bring it back. So that's another way where you're planting this seed for him to maybe make that introduction to his son so that you can have that conversation with him. And he'll probably do that if you plant that seed. If you don't plant that seed, he might not even think about making the connection. And then you got to bring it back to him. And one of the ways that I just brought this back from a place of being from influence is I said, now how else can I be a resource to you? Which implies I was just a resource to you.
Yeah, right.
It's a good thing, because now it allows him to go, ooh, Mike is a good resource. And that's the kind of impression that you want to leave with people.
Okay, so I really like that a lot, and that's an NLP technique I'm certain of. I heard another NLP technique that I want to get your opinion on, because it stuck with me, and I don't know how valid or beneficial it is. So the speaker was talking about, hey, when you're doing this presentation, toward the middle of it, you say something to the effect of, well, by now, you should realize the fact that blah, 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 whatever, right? But the fact that you said by now, meaning by now, their mind hears buy, by now, and it's an implied command. And I'm thinking, is there a way that your brain really works like that you're really being told to purchase now when you hear the word by now, you should understand?
Well, I think there's been some things where there's some like videos on YouTube where it shows people like going through this thing. And so, yes, it's a technique. It's known as an embedded command. It's not something that I would teach in that way. There are people who are very proficient at it. It doesn't align with what I teach. I will say another example of an embedded command that I do in fact teach is I will say to somebody when we get to the part where we've gone through step 4, which is the proposal, and we've reached step 5, I might say to you in a conversation, now, Mike, based on everything we've chatted about, is this a solution that you'd like to move forward with now?
Yeah.
Now is an embedded command that is essentially saying, okay, make a decision, but I'm asking it in a question format. I'm not doing this like these little subtle buy now drops. Yes, it is a technique, and no, it's not something that I teach.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. But I do like that last twist that you did. Is this a strategy that you would feel like you would want to take advantage of now? So now your brain hears now, and they're like, well, I guess now better than 2 months from now. So talk a little bit about what is one technique that you teach to really develop the relationship. And what I would say is there probably is something from both sides of the equation. Like, for instance, the salesperson needs to realize if you do want to develop a relationship which has long-term benefits, you need to approach it that way and not have commission breath and not be waiting for a break in the conversation to take their credit card. It's going to take more than one call.
Well, one of the simplest techniques, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit, is this idea of matching and mirroring. And one way that you can match and mirror a client is in your rate of speech. And this is actually a really effective way to do this. Everybody kind of is on a spectrum, let's say 0 to 10. People who talk really, really fast, they're kind of up in that 8, 9, 10 level. But then sometimes you meet somebody who really takes their time when they're speaking. And if you are like an 8 and you want to have a conversation with a prospect who's kind of a 3 or a 4, it's worth it for you to slow down, because people who have a slower rate of speech, this is not based on intellect or any of that. They're perfect the way they are, but it often is an indicator of the way they process information. Sometimes those of us who speak really, really fast, we have a thought and it instantly comes out of our mouth. Whereas sometimes people who have a little bit of a slower rate of speech, they have a thought, they think about it a little bit, they decide how they're going to say it, and then it comes out. And so you have to give those people time to process what you're saying. So being willing to slow down your rate of speech. You don't have to match them exactly, because like you said before, it can start to feel like, are you mimicking me? Because that's offensive.
Right.
But if you're, let's say you're talking to somebody who's like a 4 and you're an 8, if you're willing to slow down even to a 6, you'll make it easier for that person to stay in conversation with you. It'll be more pleasant. Now, if you're a 4 and you want to earn the business of somebody who's a 10, you cannot talk to that person at a 4. They'll find it annoying. They'll want to finish your sentences. They'll interrupt you constantly. So you have to be willing to speed up a little bit. And frankly, this technique is something that you only have to do for a little bit of time in a conversation, because what will happen is if they're interested in the conversation, they're interested in what you're having to say, and they feel engaged in the conversation, they will also start to either slow down or speed up as well, and then you'll find a happy medium. Yeah. So you don't feel like you're having to stretch yourself so far outside of your comfort zone. Yeah. And then you get to have a real nice back and forth conversation with somebody.
That's awesome. Well, I really think that you just take a great approach to that misinterpreted word selling. So it should just be solution finding or relationship, whatever. Yeah. But I really like your approach, Nikki. So thank you so much for coming on. What's the best way people can reach out and connect with you, learn more, pick up a copy of one of your books?
Well, I'm going to wrap this around a gift for your listener, if that's okay. I have an ebook that's called Closing the Sale, and it kind of talks through the last 3 steps and gives some language suggestions and some ideas of ways to be more effective when closing business. And you can get that by going to Your Sales Maven, it's maven.com/influential. And that's just for your listeners. And then we'll be connected because you'll have my ebook.
Awesome. Well, Nikki, thank you so much for coming on today. It was really a pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.